Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's Supply Chain Brain webinar, How Real-Time Big Data via IoT Devices and Predictive Analytics Are Transforming Supply Chains. I'm Bob Bowman, Managing Editor of Supply Chain Brain, and I will serve as your host for today's discussion. One quick housekeeping note, there will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so members of the audience are invited to submit their questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on the question button in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Now, while traditional supply chain visibility solutions have delivered incremental value, the latent nature of EDI status updates and inherent blind spots over extended periods of a journey have proved limiting. Born of the Internet of Things, a new approach has emerged that is enabling companies to see the live movement of their goods in motion anywhere in the world with no blind spots and no latency. This transformational approach is also enabling companies to predict and avoid future supply chain disruptions resulting from severe weather, port congestion, customs clearance times, road construction, and a host of other external factors. Now, over the course of this webinar, John Santagate from IDC and Heather Crotty from Transvoyant will compare and contrast traditional supply chain visibility versus real-time predictive analytics using live streaming big data. Then, Chase Mueller, Manager Supply Chain Visibility at Brooks Running, will detail how Brooks is using real-time big data and predictive analytics to dynamically manage availability date, drive efficiencies in downstream operations, reduce lead time, and improve customer service. So now, without further ado, I would like to turn things over to John, who will be giving a primer on the value and trends of real-time visibility and predictive intelligence that IDC is seeing among the world's top supply chains. John, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Bob. And hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today to talk about, how we view the Internet of Things and real-time big data and analytics as a transformational factor relative to supply chain management. As Bob mentioned, my name is John Santagate. I'm a research manager at IDC Manufacturing Insights, where my job is really to conduct market research and provide advice to software vendors and software users relative to current business trends and technology in the supply chain space. Let me see here. I cannot control the slides. If I could get access for that, please. There we go. So before we go ahead and get started, I'd like to just tell you all a little bit about IDC. We're a research and advisory firm. What we do is we help companies to really make sense of the constantly evolving market for technology and really look at how technology can be used to help improve business processes. We have a network of over 1,100 analysts worldwide, and these analysts and this global reach really allow us to provide relevant research across the dimensions of industry, function, and geography. So with the commercial out of the way here, I will go ahead and move on to discuss the Internet of Things relative to supply management. So really, data is all around us, right? All of our businesses are essentially constantly generating mountains of data on a continuous basis, especially now in what is really the age of the Internet of Things. But the hard part isn't necessarily generating the data. The hard part is really making sense of all this data. And at IDC, as you can see on the slide here, we believe that the value of the IoT solution is proportional to the speed and number of times the original IoT data is analyzed. So the fact is, all of this data that we are generating on a continuous basis really has little to no value until you're able to analyze it and draw meaningful insights out of it. So IoT is about generating the data. Analytics is about making sense of the data. So today's advances in technology, things like cognitive computing or artificial intelligence or machine learning and advanced algorithms, these things are really allowing us to move beyond, traditional descriptive analytics, which descriptive analytics is really about telling us what has happened. And it's allowing us really to move to a point where we have the capacity to engage predictive and prescriptive analytics, which really start to take what has happened in the past and allow us to start to understand, what may happen in the future, what is probably going to happen in the future, and really start to tell us what we should do about it. For example, predictive analytics can tell us that a machine on our production line is going to break down and give us a time frame. Say it's going to break down in 2 weeks, or that a weather-related disruption is going to occur on our transit lane in the next 2 days or week or whatever the case may be. Prescriptive analytics then takes that a next step further, right? With prescriptive analytics, we can allow data to tell us that we should take this machine offline and conduct specific repairs, and when it most makes sense to take the machine offline, so it least disrupts our business, or we should reroute the shipment on the best path in order to avoid the disruption, but allow us to maintain our ETAs and continue to meet our customer service levels, right? So, over time, as we were able to really capture and continuously analyze the mountains of data that we are generating in our businesses, and we can really then use this information to start to make more informed business decisions. So, as the IoT continues to capture and really communicate mountains of data, the companies that are able to make sense of the IoT data will most certainly be better positioned to thrive in the coming years. This is especially true in the supply chain, as value networks consist of an abundance of business partners and moving parts. The promise of IoT is really to help companies leverage advanced analytics to improve supply chain performance and draw wasted time, wasted movement, and excess cost out of the supply chain, all helping us to be more efficient businesses. So now, the value of big data and advanced analytics, really requires the data to have three core attributes. The data must be analyzable, it must be actionable, and it must be beneficial. The first prediction on the left talks about the increasing capability of technology to enable the separation of analyzable data from white noise. At IDC, we believe that improvements in technology are allowing us to increase the amount of data that can effectively be analyzed. Now, this leads to the data being actionable, which through an increased volume of analyzable data and improved analytical capabilities really delivers an increase in the actionable information. Now, when we say actionable, we're really talking about drawing useful information out of the data, the ability to use data to help us make better business decisions. The Internet of Things is really helping to increase the amount of analyzable data, while IoT-related analytic applications are what is really helping us to make sense of all of this added information and new data points that we're continuously generating, and to produce actionable insight out of that data. The third prediction on the left here talks about the capability for actionable intelligence to deliver benefits. So, companies and organizations that are able to take the greatest advantage of data by analyzing relevant data and turning it into action-ready insight, they will achieve greater benefits than their less analytically capable peers and competitors. So, really, over the course of this, if you take one thing away from my component of this presentation here, I want you to remember that data is only as valuable as your ability to act on it and the benefit that you will receive from that action. So, I'm going to go ahead and move on now to talk about some of the factors driving change in the supply chain that are helping to make the case for the adoption of an IoT strategy in the supply chain. So here, we see several elements we believe are involved in driving the need for change in the supply chain and to leverage the Internet of Things in order to maintain competitiveness and drive profitable growth in today's business environment. We have we have identified these 4 drivers that IDC believes is playing a significant role in the need for supply chain evolution. What we're not saying is that these are the only things that are driving change, but for the purpose of this discussion, I wanted to call out 4 that we really felt have a significant impact here. The first is the value chain power shift, right? So as technology has continued to enable global commerce, really supply chains must leverage effective collaboration and cooperation as a business and value network. It has been said, that companies no longer really compete, but rather supply chains compete. And I've heard that, several times over the last couple of years. And I believe that this cannot be more true today, as businesses really rely on their end-to-end value chain as a source of competitive advantage. So the shift here is that companies, really rely more heavily on their suppliers to help drive supply chain efficiencies, while simultaneously really relying heavily on their customers and downstream partners to help provide the best direction forward. So now, moving on to the next driver here, I would really argue that all IoT-related initiatives are tightly tied to the idea of digital transformation. Digital transformation is really about leveraging the power of data and modern technology to drive value in today's connected supply chain. Digital transformation has been disruptive to entire industries. I want you to think about, the power of the current app economy and the social economy, and sort of what this has done to different industries. And 2 easy, examples of this would be the taxi industry and the hospitality industry. They've experienced those industries, specifically digital transformation, through the emergence of, Uber and Airbnb. And so companies today really must, and supply chains really must be focused on the way in which technology can and is impacting their business, and how they must adopt in order to continue to grow in today's environment. So moving on, really with globalization, we're not just talking about doing business across borders, although that plays a significant role here. We're also talking about the forecasted addition of 1.9 billion people to the global population by 2030. This is a significant increase, and so this impact will really drive up the demand for products, which will inevitably lead to the need for supply chains to have to do more with less, faster. What we mean there is sustain and be able to support the demands, a larger volume of demand, but maintain or not necessarily grow as rapidly in terms of the resources that are required to support that demand growth, and achieve rapid transformation much more quickly than historically was required. So the story here really is that as the human population really continues to expand, companies will have to be innovative in their approach to delivering their products and services to a much broader base of customers. The power here of the Internet of Things and advanced analytics can really help supply chains to become more efficient, to grow profitably, and to reduce cost in order to be more competitive in an increasingly digital world here. And then finally, we're talking about the interconnected ecosystem in which all organizations compete today. And this is really introducing, as I mentioned earlier, an exponential increase in the volume of data that is available to analyze relative to the supply chain. This point really gets back to the previous slide where we talked about the need for data to be analyzable, actionable, and beneficial. So as more and more devices are connected to the IoT and they're producing both structured and unstructured data, it becomes imperative that supply chains leverage the power of the Internet of Things and advanced analytics to really become better at making sense of all the data in order to improve the flow of goods and information throughout the supply chain. Now, these challenges, they're really adding a tremendous degree of complexity for supply chains, and they're really helping us to make the case for supply chains to embrace and leverage Internet of Things initiatives in order to evolve and successfully compete in the digital age. So now here, what I really want to call out is that the Internet of Things is still a bit confusing and a bit of an ambiguous subject for many. And so first, what I want to do is clear things up a little bit and define the IoT as IDC sees it, which is as a network of networks of uniquely identifiable endpoints or things that communicate bidirectionally and autonomously using IP connectivity. I know that's still a little bit confusing, but basically what we are saying is that the IoT is a broad network of devices that can be reached or send data signals out through internet connectivity. Things like a Nest thermostat in your home or a GPS sensor on a truck. These are IoT connected devices, and they are sending data signals out. They can be connected to, they can be accessed, and they can be controlled remotely as long as they have their unique IP address. The point is, IoT connected devices really are all around us in our personal and professional environments today, and they're continuing to increase in numbers. But the devices here are just one layer in the IoT ecosystem. We also need to really think about the connectivity layer, which is enabling communication to and from each device. We need to think about the communications layer, which enables us to capture the data coming from the devices and, where appropriate, send signals back to these devices. We need to think about the platforms that are enabling an aggregation and storage of this data, and we really have to think about applications that are enabling us to conduct analytics on top of all this data that is continuously being generated from these IoT connected devices. And critically, we must also keep in mind the security layer, which is increasingly becoming one of the more important and hot topics relative to IoT. Remember that one aspect of the definition of IoT was the device's ability for access and communication is bidirectional. Now, this means that each device now represents a point of access into your network that must be secured. Now, the point of all this really is to emphasize the scale and complexity of what the IoT really is. And for supply chain, this ecosystem really creates an opportunity, I think, to gain a tremendous amount of data from an abundance of sources that supply chains can effectively use to analyze, which will enable better supply chain operations. So now I'm going to go on and move on to talk about the value proposition of big data and analytics relative to the supply chain as enabled by IoT. So here, really, the big message is that through IoT connectivity, supply chains really now have the power to gain true real-time visibility into across the supply chain. But getting back to the earlier message, visibility is like data. It's not that you have it, but it's really how you use it and how you generate value out of visibility. There's that old saying, knowledge is power. But this was drawn up well before the age of the Internet of Things. I would argue that knowledge represents the data, and that today it is more about what you can do with that knowledge and data and how fast you can do it, really start to set organizations and their supply chains apart from one another. This is where IDC really believes that predictive intelligence can help companies differentiate their supply chains and their overall organizations from their peers. So at IDC, we have made the prediction that by 2020, organizations able to analyze all relevant data and deliver actionable information will achieve an extra $430 billion in productivity benefits over their less analytically oriented peers. Now, here, this is a macro statement. It really goes beyond just the supply chain, but really covers the broad value across an entire organization. The power of that statement really is in the scale of the potential savings of organizations that are able to better analyze and act on the data that they have and that they're continuing to grow. In many cases, this value will be relative to predictive and prescriptive analytics for sure. As an example, really think about how valuable it would be to be able to predict when a machine's going to go down and schedule maintenance before an unplanned failure, or how valuable it would be for your organization to be able to predict that a disruption is imminent along your logistics route and then have the ability to change that route and avoid disruption and continue to meet your service level targets. This is the power of the Internet and how it's transforming supply chains. The vast network of connected devices are really generating data that advanced analytics applications are then able to use in order to improve supply chain performance through the visibility of what's going on throughout the supply chain and the analytics that's enabling us to understand what's going to happen, what is happening, act on that understanding. So now let's have a look quickly at the difference here between traditional linear supply chains and how IoT is enabling supply chains really to evolve. Historically, supply chains really consisted of products flowing downstream while data and money flows back upstream. And, companies were often constrained by the information coming back, would often lose visibility and connection with the product as it progressed towards the customer. And so today, supply chains are really no longer linear. The emergence of omni-channel commerce and things like commerce networks and visibility at every step throughout the supply chain, they have made it imperative that all cogs in the supply chain wheel really have insight across the entire value chain, or wheel in this case. Think about this for a second, really. Retailers are private labeling products today in increasing numbers, while CPG companies are increasingly looking at ways to become better at providing direct-to-consumer fulfillment. So does this mean that retailers and CPG manufacturers are now competitors? In some instances, that's definitely true. But more true today is that it's really about the customer. Leading supply chains are no stranger to the notion, really, that customers must be at the center of the supply chain. And to do this, they must work with all of their supply chain partners in order to make sure that all participants in the supply chain are working to provide the best outcomes for the customer. The IoT and advanced analytics are tools here to help supply chains move beyond the traditional approach and evolve towards a more modern approach to supply chain management. With IoT, supply chains now have more data available about each step in the process, as well as the visibility and the analytical power to create actionable insights that improve customer outcomes. This means that they must leverage analytics in order to turn this data into the action that really best supports the demands of the customer. So now I want to take a quick look at the role of IoT and analytics as it relates to an integrated supply chain. Integrated supply chain has been one of the most frequent topics that I hear about from manufacturing companies and application vendors lately. The bottom line here is that really creating an integrated supply chain is a tremendously complex issue. An integrated approach to supply chain requires that supply chain planning and supply chain execution become tightly coupled, where supply chain planning drives execution and supply chain execution drives supply chain planning. And we all know that there are tremendous layers of applications and business process in there that traditionally inhibit this. This is in stark contrast to the traditional way in which most supply chains operated. The traditional disconnect, really, between the two is most certainly related to a lack of visibility across different roles and functions within an organization and throughout the supply chain. The good news here is that companies are getting better in this regard. And part of this is to improvements in data access, data availability, visibility, and improved analytics. A bit later, we're going to hear from Chase and Brooks Running and how they have been able to leverage the Internet of Things and advanced analytics to help improve supply chain performance by using real-time visibility of in-transit inventory that is enabling more planning and downstream operations. The point here is that the Internet of Things and advanced analytics are truly helping supply chains to achieve top performance. I know I mentioned earlier that it's not just about the data, but rather the ability to turn data into action. Now, we have a lot of data available across the modern supply chains, and I strongly believe that as we improve our ability to analyze this data and draw relationships across the supply chain information, that it will become easier to create an integrated approach to supply chain management. So now I'm going to go ahead and move on to talk about where companies tell us in our surveys the priorities are and how IoT deployments are delivering real results in the supply chain. So first, let me apologize. I realize that this is a bit of an eye chart, but I do think it is important to take a look at sort of what supply chain executives see as their business priorities in order to start to draw a line between priorities and how IoT and advanced analytics can help. The top priority of the 500 or so supply chain executives that we surveyed this year is reducing cost and eliminating waste. Now let's think about this as a priority, and then think about how many ways there are for IoT and analytics to really help. Waste and cost exist all across the supply chain. Wouldn't real-time visibility into the movement of materials help to reduce cost and the time of in-transit inventory? And wouldn't that sort of visibility allow you to become better at leveraging the full scope of your inventory as it relates to fulfilling customer demand? Wouldn't it help to know if your assets were not being used to their full capacity? And then through advanced analytics, start to look at how you can reallocate resources or reposition assets to get better, more efficient use out of them. So customer centricity came up as the second highest priority. With the IoT and analytics, wouldn't it be possible to really better connect with how your customers use your products, or what they are saying about your service, or even how to improve how you deliver your products to meet the needs of the customer? That's another topic, going beyond these priorities that we at IDC hear about. There's a tremendous amount of interest in the design and development of connected products, whether that's a connected car, a Nest, connected shoes, connected clothing. In a lot of industry segments today, it is all about how do you apply IoT devices in order to better understand how the customers use and respond to products, and better connect with how you use and manage your products. So a bit farther down the list of what our executives are telling us are priorities about their supply chain is to respond more quickly to demand volatility or changes. Really here we're talking about downstream agility. So do you think it would help to be able to predict volatility in demand and make a change ahead of time? Change your inventory strategy, start to engage in demand shaping to move inventory that perhaps down the line there is going to be less organic demand. The Internet of Things and advanced analytics can help to identify these things and can really help supply chains to become more agile in how they operate in real time. Greater than 20% of respondents pointed to supply disruptions or changes, upstream agility as a top priority. So isn't the ability to what's coming down the pipe for supply and where there's risk, is how valuable could that be for today's businesses, especially in manufacturing industries, and then be able to predict and provide the next best action given an upcoming disruption. Even visibility and traceability, continues to be on the list and came through with 20% of executives putting visibility and traceability in the top 3 of their business priorities. The point here is that IoT and advanced analytics can truly help supply chains to improve in the areas of their highest business priority. There is so much data throughout the supply chain. We just need to get better at how we capture and analyze this information and how we turn it into actionable intelligence. So here we see the top areas where surveyed supply chain executives have identified with actually achieving benefits from their existing IoT deployments in their supply chains. It's important to realize here that these are not the only places of value that is being achieved. Rather, these are the top 4 that showed up in the survey this year, and we certainly anticipate that these numbers both to grow for these values and to start to see more areas of value as IoT and advanced analytics continues to mature as a technology segment. There really are so many potential areas to introduce IoT into the supply chain. There's really no one-size-fits-all IoT application at least for now, it's really about finding the appropriate use case within your own organization and adapting an IoT strategy and analytics approach to tackle your own most pressing challenges. I really think this graph shows us here that shipment tracking is probably one of the more available options that can provide real value. Sensor data is broadly available for shipment tracking. The challenge has been the frequency and the quality of the data and the ability to effectively analyze this data and to turn it into action-ready insights. It is possible today to know in real time where your stuff is. The next step here is really to layer on an analytics in order to tell you, where it needs to be and the best way to get it there. Inventory visibility, a very long time goal in the supply chain. Inventory is all over the network and in motion. And today, we do have the ability through the Internet of Things to see in real time a complete picture of inventory and make better use of it with the analytic capabilities. Earlier I talked about customer centricity, and we saw 36.5% of supply chain executives say they have achieved value relative to becoming a more customer-centric organization as a result of IoT. And overall supply chain visibility is fourth on our list here, where suppliers have achieved benefits from their IoT deployments. This is a bit of a more tricky area, but the fact that over 31% of executives say they have achieved benefit here, really points to IoT actually being a real enabler to improving supply chain performance. So here, I'm going to go ahead and hand the baton to Heather. She's going to dig a little deeper into what the IoT and advanced analytics really means for the supply chain.
Thank you, John. So with that wonderful presentation and analysis by John as a backdrop, I'd love to spend a few minutes now describing specifically how big data analytics automation is being applied to supply chains. So, of course, it all begins with the real-time big data that is being collected, cleansed, normalized, and packaged for processing. So we're talking about the real-time locations of aircraft, ocean vessels, trucks, and rail cars, as well as external events that can disrupt or impact the supply chain. And these external events include things like port congestion, severe weather, natural disasters, wave heights, wind speeds, road construction, traffic accidents, custom clearance times, and more. These are all being collected in real time from devices that make up the Internet of Things, such as satellites, radar, sensors, smartphones, and process control devices. Note, though, that I do make the distinction that this is real-time data, right? Supply chains operate in real time, disruptions are unfolding in real time, alerting and remediation must happen in real time for them to be effective. This real-time nature of the data and the predictive nature of the analytics are what makes this approach so transformative. And given its real-time nature and massive volumes, the only way to make sense of these big data streams is via very powerful, fast-processing machine learning algorithms. An advanced analytics solution employs a host of rules and algorithms, each specifically attuned to produce desired insights. The output is live and predictive insights that significantly improve supply chain performance. So what do some of these insights look like? Well, John gave a few examples of these earlier, but other representative examples include a recommendation to source from a secondary supplier in China to avoid a predicted labor strike in Malaysia, the location of your primary supplier, for instance. Guidance to choose a different ocean carrier on a different lane in order to avoid delays associated with severe weather and port congestion. Or even a recommendation to adjust your dock and labor schedule to meet a shipment that's predicted to arrive at your warehouse 2 hours earlier than planned. So when you have this real-time visibility of your goods in motion and insights like the ones I just described, you can do all kinds of exciting things. You can commit inventory in transit to dynamic demand. You can effectively coordinate shipment handoffs between trading partners and supply chain nodes. You can compete with vertically integrated same-day delivery competitors. These are all truly transformational capabilities. So now I'd like to hand it off to Chase Mueller, Manager of Supply Chain Visibility at Brooks Running, who can share his firsthand experiences with supply chain predictive analytics.
Thanks, Heather. So my name is Chase Mueller. I'm with Brooks Running. Today I want to share with you how Brooks runs on big data for in-transit visibility. And it was defined as one of our first use cases for applying supply chain visibility. And we partnered with Transvoyant on big data to achieve this. So I'll give you an overview of Brooks just to familiarize yourself with our brand, talk about the problem that we were solving, what the solution was, why we use big data or why we chose big data, and then what kind of wins we're seeing just from a business standpoint. So Brooks Running was founded in 1914, so we're over 100 years old. We've been in footwear the whole time, but we've bounced around a number of different categories in that time span. But since the early 2000s, we've been a niche running brand, and that's where we've really hit our sweet spot. We're headquartered in Seattle, and we're a subsidiary of Berkshire Hathaway. So we've been under Berkshire Hathaway as a direct subsidiary for 3 years now. Brooks Running sells performance footwear, apparel, sports bras, accessories in more than 50 countries worldwide. And our purpose is to inspire everyone to run and be active by creating innovative gear designed to keep runners running longer, farther, and faster. And as a runner, I really enjoy working for Brooks because we're truly passionate about the run. So I'd like to explain what the problem was that I was trying to solve at Brooks and then how we approached it. So basically, what we were up against was a lack of trust in the available to promise picture in our company. For those of you not familiar, available to promise is the inventory that you have available for customers for at-once availability. And for us, the problem with that was that we weren't exactly, our POs were coming in oftentimes earlier than the planning date that was on our POs. In fact, only 3% of our POs arrived on the date that we thought that they would be here, and over 94% of POs were early, and 60% of which were earlier by more than 7 days, which to me presented a huge opportunity for us to be able to have product show available for our customers earlier than what we were currently showing. And so there's a real sales opportunity there and an increased level of customer service and ability to commit inventory. So why were we having this issue? Really, there's a lot of variability in the vessel ETA that's provided by the carriers and our forwarders. And our PO plan dates in our system are static, meaning that once we place the PO, the ERP system essentially just uses the lead time as a general offset and sets the plan date. And once we receive the ETA from the carrier, the time of shipment, there weren't any adjustments being made to the plan date. Nobody was managing those. They were just set. It was kind of a set and go model. And ultimately, we're driven by customer service, and we set our lead times up, especially for transit, around a worst case scenario to ensure that the planning dates in our system weren't going to be violated, meaning we weren't going to say product was here when it was going to be late. So we accounted for 100% of the possibilities rather than trying to be smart about it and planning for the 95%, which would provide us an opportunity to go for reduced lead times, and managing the 5% back in. So the resulting issues of managing our transit lane against this variability was unnecessary expediting. So at-once availability is extremely important to our customers. When a runner determines that they need to replace their running shoe, they want to do it right then, oftentimes because they're in the middle of training for a big event, and if you're not there with the shoe that they want at that moment in time, you could lose them to a different brand for eternity. So it's really important in our business that you have the shoe for the customer when they want it. So Patching up ATP often resulted in air freight. So if we saw that we were negative on a certain size, we'd look to see if there's an opportunity that we could leapfrog ocean shipments by airing something in to improve availability immediately. Also, what this trust in ATP caused was a reduced customer service. We were oftentimes back ordering product later for a customer than when we actually needed to, but it was because we didn't have any certainty about when the product was going to be here. So when the product showed up 15 days earlier than that back order date, we didn't have a way that our system just assesses and moves that customer order forward. It just sits at that later date, and so they have to wait for the product. It also led to customer order rework, or splitting of orders. And so we strive to ship 100% full and on time to our customers. And if we don't have an order to ship in full, we'll split the order off and ship the remaining pairs that are going to be later on a separate order. This also led to unnecessary back orders, because sometimes we'd split these orders and then the product would arrive actually on time to have fulfilled the original order. And ultimately, this leads to missed sales opportunities and excessive emails. When will it be here? And that just kind of closes the loop on the trust issue. So you have customer service reaching out to the logistics teams because they know that sometimes product arrives earlier, and they're trying to see if there's an opportunity that it might. So, so the solution was, if we could leverage in-transit visibility to improve product availability accuracy, we could improve the accuracy of our available to promise for our customers. And so how could we do that? Well, we could augment what we know and control with a solution that eliminates the uncertainty in the transit segment. For us, that was, when will the vessel actually berth? So with more certainty of ETA, we can dynamically manage the availability date of a PO by applying an offset for ETA to put away. Essentially, if we can measure the performance through analysis of how long it takes from the time the boat berths or arrives at the port to the point in time that it's put away at our distribution center, and determine at a 95% confidence interval that time span is roughly 8 days. Based on that, we can use that as an offset. So if we can leverage the Internet of Things to determine a more precise ETA, then we can use that as a jump-off point for applying the offset and managing the plan date dynamically in the system. So that's what we've done here at Brooks, and so far it's been really successful. So why big data? Really, I sought out multiple solutions around this, and I really feel like big data is the new forecasting methodology to drive better visibility to what you expect to happen in the future. It's really grounded on real-time events, not just a forecasting model. It's scaled real-time data analysis with a multitude of data sources being leveraged. It's a learning model. It identifies patterns and it adapts. It's flexible to multiple use cases. The predictive accuracy is really good. It's a relatively low cost and easy to implement solution. So I'd like to share with you some of the wins that we've achieved since we went live with in-transit visibility leveraging big data. So we've seen a reduction in our lead times. We've been able to take 14% lead time out of our China transit lane and 7% lead time out of our Vietnam transit lane. In terms of downstream efficiencies, we've noted a 68% increase in the accuracy of the ETA provided by Transvoyant versus what the carrier is providing. So we continue to measure the delta between what the carrier provides us as an ETA and what Transvoyant provides us as an ETA to determine how accurate Transvoyant is, and also how we can tune the algorithm to achieve higher level of accuracy. And then we also achieve early detection of late vessels. So we're able to take the data that Transvoyant provides and identify if a vessel is is tracking late or early. And if it is tracking late, we can be proactive and easily link that vessel to the purchase orders and styles and quantities that are on it and proactively address any issues up front or figure out a way that we can expedite those from the port to DC to ensure that they meet our in-system date. We've improved customer service. 60% of POs have realized an improved availability of at least 5 days, and 32% improvement in availability accuracy, meaning that we've improved how close we are to receiving goods into the system relative to the planned date. And 0 POs have been received later than our adjusted availability date. So we still see there being a lot of opportunity there. So with that, I'm going to hand off to John. He has a piece to end with here, and then we'll be opening it up for questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Chase. And great job. I mean, that was when I first heard about this case study. It was very exciting to talk with Chase about it and hear about the experience. And I look at the value there. And in my industry, we've talked about the IoT for several years here, and it's fantastic to see use cases, real life use cases in companies that are starting to talk about not just theorizing how to use IoT, but really start to showcase the value that they are actually achieving. That's one of the most exciting things for me as an analyst in this space here. So as we sort of wrap up here, a few pieces of guidance for those companies thinking about getting involved in the IoT, or really not thinking about when, I guess is probably the right way to put it. The first point here is start small. It doesn't need to be an IoT strategy. Need to be a big bang approach. There are a lot of purpose-built IoT applications out there that enable companies to leverage the power of the Internet of Things, but do so on a purpose-built platform. In the case Chase was talking about, getting better visibility into in-transit inventory. The second point here we call out, identify quick win opportunities. Right? There's, in any sort of project planning or roadmap planning, there's going to be opportunities that provide a faster time to value and have a better probability of a successful implementation. So as you think about your supply chain, start to look where those opportunities exist, and then take the time to engage in the market to understand which vendors are out there that may already have a purpose-built application for your solution. IoT engagements are large scale. They're digitally transformative, but in order to make transition a little bit easier on the organization, the key here is you don't have to go for the big bang. You can start small, and you can find areas where you'll get value out of the gate. I mentioned evaluating the purpose-built applications, so I won't go too far beyond that here. Leverage small-scale implementations of technology in general. You can prove the business case. So you want to take a small-scale approach. You want to find quick wins. You want to look at application vendors that may have that already have an existing solution to help you address your quick wins that isn't a big bang approach. And now you want to prove the business case by showing the organization, showing the CFO or the folks with the purse strings that you're achieving with these initiatives. And you can leverage those projects as learning opportunities and building blocks so that it's easier to gain buy-in from the broader organization for your more ambitious, perhaps longer-term, higher-budget IoT projects. And finally, here, as I called out very early on in the presentation, remember, IoT projects are not just about the data. They are about the ability to draw actionable intelligence out of the data. You need to be able to capture the information, but more importantly, is to be able to structure that information and draw insights out of it that enable you to go forth and improve your business.